We have a little bit of breaking news here from the courts. A federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from attempting to dismantle the Department of Education. What do we know about that?
Yeah, another breaking development just in the past few minutes, Alex. A district court judge in Massachusetts who was hearing a case over the dismantling of the Department of Education and the transferring of all of those millions of dollars of student loans that are run by the government to the Small Business Association. Well, that judge has now issued an injunction blocking that process, freezing the mass firings of Department of Education employees here in Washington, D.C. and also...
Señores, otro revés judicial para la agenda del presidente Donald Trump. En esta ocasión, un juez federal acaba de bloquear su plan para desmantelar el Departamento de Educación y seguir con esta ola de despidos. Despedir a más de 1,000 empleados públicos. Señores, hablamos de un fallo que no solo ordena la reincorporación inmediata de los trabajadores, sino que también rechaza de raíz el argumento central del gobierno trumpista, que podía hacerlo sin la aprobación del Congreso. Amigos, este es el último episodio en una larga lista de decisiones judiciales que limitan el poder unilateral del Ejecutivo bajo esta administración. Señores, sean bienvenidos a Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Hoy veremos cómo un juez bloquea el plan de Trump para desmantelar al Departamento de Educación y continuar con esta ola de despidos masivos. Así que los invito a que se queden hasta el final de este video porque veremos los detalles más interesantes. Pues bueno, señores, el juez federal Myung ha emitido una orden preliminar que detiene este plan de Trump para eliminar por completo el Departamento de Educación. Su decisión fue muy clara. El presidente no puede desmantelar una agencia federal con una sola firma ejecutiva. La idea de que las acciones de los demandados son meramente una reorganización es claramente falsa. Veamos de qué se trata esta noticia.
We have a little bit of breaking news here from the courts. A federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from attempting to dismantle the Department of Education. What do we know about that?
Yeah, another breaking development just in the past few minutes, Alex. A district court judge in Massachusetts who was hearing a case over the dismantling of the Department of Education and the transferring of all of those millions of dollars of student loans that are run by the government to the Small Business Association. Well, that judge has now issued an injunction blocking that process, freezing the mass firings of Department of Education employees here in Washington, D.C., and also blocking the transfer of those loans to a different agency. The judge saying basically that the Trump administration can't dismantle an agency without an act of Congress. Congress created the agency so that this is yet again another, if temporary, setback for the Trump administration delivered by an individual judge in a district court case, at least for now, slowing down efforts to overhaul the federal government here in Washington, Alex.
Well, and Devin, we've heard from many of those students who've talked about the confusion, and you talk about a loan portfolio of $1.6 trillion. Certainly more questions from borrowers today. Devin Dwyer, thank you so much.
Pues bueno, amigos, esta sentencia se suma a una serie de medidas legales que han frenado algunos de los esfuerzos más radicales de esta administración para querer transformar unilateralmente el funcionamiento del gobierno federal. En este caso vemos cómo el juez no solo anuló la medida, sino que también ordenó la vuelta inmediata de más de 1,300 empleados que habían sido despedidos en marzo, como parte de este plan MAGA para reducir el tamaño del Estado. Recordemos que ayer mismo también Donald Trump recibió otro golpe legal, donde un juez federal declaró que esta administración había violado una orden judicial al deportar a ciertos migrantes a Sudán del Sur. Veamos esta nota.
A federal judge in Massachusetts said Wednesday the Trump administration's deportation of 8 migrants, quote, unquestionably violates a court order blocking deportations to third countries without allowing detainees to contest their removal. The Department of Homeland Security did not confirm the whereabouts of the flight, which left from Texas Tuesday, but immigration lawyers say They were told it was headed for war-torn South Sudan. The State Department has issued a warning for Americans not to travel there due to violent crime, kidnapping, and armed conflict. DHS officials say the 8 men were in the U.S. illegally and came from Cuba, Laos, Mexico, Myanmar, South Sudan, and Vietnam. A spokesperson defended the administration's decision to deport them Wednesday, claiming they're convicted criminals.
Every single one of them was convicted of a heinous crime: murder, rape, child rape, rape of a mentally and physically handicapped victim. While we are fully compliant with the law and court orders, it is absolutely absurd for a district judge to try to dictate the foreign policy and national security of the United States of America.
District Judge Brian Murphy previously ruled the government must allow detainees to either consent to their removal or be given the chance to challenge it. Attorneys for the Justice Department say the judge's order was, quote, not specific enough, which led to a misunderstanding. For more, let's bring in CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez. So, Camilo, the judge could order the Department of Homeland Security to conduct reasonable interviews with the migrants on the plane.
Yes.
What does that mean? And again, do we know the whereabouts of the plane?
It's a critical question, both of them. So what we do know is that Judge Murphy back in April said that the administration could not carry out third country deportations unless it provided detainees, one, notice of the destination country and also notice to their counsel and lawyers, but also, two, a chance to say, I am scared of going to this third country because I fear I could be persecuted or otherwise victimized in that country. And what Judge Murphy is saying is that this flight that appeared to be on its way to South Sudan did violate this order because he said that these migrants were not given a meaningful and reasonable chance to make that contest and to fight their deportation. He said the migrants were put on this plane just 24 hours after being notified that they faced deportation to South Sudan and that they were never screened by asylum officers for any type of concern of being persecuted there. And now he suggested in this hearing today that he could very well order the administration to interview these migrants, maybe overseas. We do not know the current whereabouts of those detainees. They could be in a place in Africa, for all we know, but the administration could very well be forced to interview these detainees to make sure that they are not facing harm in South Sudan if they are deported there.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because there are so many cases right now, but some of the Supreme Court justices have said 24 hours is likely not sufficient notice, right?
And that is for the Alien Enemies Act case, which is that wartime authority that the administration has been trying to cite to deport suspected members of Venezuelan
the amount of notice
gangs. Well, lawyers for this group of migrants are saying that the notice in this case should actually be much more broad and that it should be broader in scope and that the time for the notice should be longer because this is immigration law, not a wartime authority that is extraordinary in scope.
Okay, a couple more stories that you have been following. So a federal judge has ordered detained Columbia University graduate student Mahmoud Khalil permission to see his wife. This comes after ICE initially refused to let him see his family, including his newborn son. What's the latest?
Well, Mr. Khalil continues to be detained by ICE in Louisiana. He, of course, missed the birth of his son a few weeks ago. His wife and their son have gone to Louisiana to try to meet with him. According to Mr. Khalil's lawyer, the family said that they wanted to be able to hold Mr. Khalil's hands and for Mr. Khalil to hold on to his newborn son. According to emails that we have reviewed, the facility, which is operated by a private prison company that works with ICE, did not consent to that request because it argues that it has a no-contact visitation policy, that people can come and visit their loved ones or their clients in ICE detention, but cannot touch them.
There is an update in Jimena Arias Cristobal's case. She is the 19-year-old woman who was stopped. She'd been living in Georgia since I believe she was 4 or 5 years old. She was stopped in a traffic stop. The traffic violations against her have been dropped, but she was still in custody because she's accused of being in the country illegally. What's the latest in her case?
What we do know is that an immigration judge today in Georgia did grant her bond, and she will be released as soon as tomorrow, we understand, and will be able to continue her immigration proceedings outside of an immigration detention center. And that really is a critical point, Lindsay, because even though she will be released, because the judge found that she is not a public safety threat or a flight risk, she still will face deportation to Mexico because ICE has started that deportation case against her. But now she will be able to continue that case outside of a detention center.
Okay, Camila Montoya Galvez, thank you.
Pues bueno, señores, este tipo de decisiones reflejan como que un constante, ¿no?, en los Estados Unidos. Los tribunales actúan como el contrapeso cuando hay intentos de concentración de poder. Y aunque Donald Trump ha insistido repetidamente en que él tiene la autoridad absoluta para reestructurar el gobierno, los jueces le recuerdan que eso no es así. Las instituciones están diseñadas para evitar que ningún presidente actúe por decreto, especialmente en asuntos que son tan sensibles, ¿no?, como lo es la educación pública. Pues bueno, amigos, la administración también pues no tardó en responder, ¿no? Y el portavoz del Departamento de Educación lanzó una crítica, digamos que dura, ¿no?, contra esta decisión judicial, afirmando que una vez más un juez de extrema izquierda ha excedido dramáticamente su autoridad. Además de ataques personales, la Casa Blanca también anunció que va a apelar a esta decisión con carácter de emergencia, etc. Pero amigos, el mensaje oficial es claro, ¿no? Esto no beneficia a los estudiantes ni a las familias estadounidenses. Lo cierto, amigos, es que la ley sigue estando del lado de quienes defienden la separación de poderes. Pues bueno, amigos, pasemos a la siguiente noticia. Hoy tenemos mucho que hablar porque si es que, pues bueno, no están al tanto, el proyecto de ley republicano en la Cámara acaba de ser aprobado. Este proyecto que afecta tu bolsillo, tu seguro médico y hasta el futuro económico del país. Hemos venido días hablando sobre este proyecto y bueno, en resumen, incluye extender recortes de impuestos, que lo que hacen es favorecer a los más ricos, hacer nuevos recortes a programas sociales como lo es el Medicaid, educación, y todo esto para aumentar el gasto en defensa. Y ojo, no todo esto respaldado por Trump como parte de su promesa de campaña. ¿Cuál será el resultado de esta decisión que se tomó hoy? Una bomba de tiempo fiscal, que cuando explote no va a salpicar a los millonarios, sino que va a salpicar a ti, a mí y a millones de personas comunes. Veamos esta noticia.
Let's bring in NBC's Melanie Zanona on Capitol Hill. Ali Vitale is at the big board, and former Ohio Governor John Kasich, who served in the House where he chaired the Budget Committee, is an MSNBC political analyst. Okay, Melanie, the speaker said 2 Republicans missed the vote because they fell asleep, but they would have voted for the bill. But where do we go now? What's happening?
Yeah, the fact 2 members fell asleep and missed the vote, a sign of just how grueling this process has been. Congress pulled 2 all-nighters back-to-back to try to get this done in the early hours this morning. And you heard there Speaker Mike Johnson even admitting at a press conference after the bill passed that there were moments that he doubted whether he was going to be able to pull this off and had to turn to prayer. But in the end, it wasn't prayer that got this over the finish line. It was a push from Donald Trump, who had 2 meetings in the Capitol and as well at the White House with the House Freedom Caucus, and also GOP leadership released a revised version of the bill late last night with a number of key changes designed to win over holdouts, all of it providing plenty of fodder for a very vigorous debate on the House floor between Democrats and Republicans late last night. Take a listen.
The One Big Beautiful Bill is exactly what this country needs. It is bold, it is clear, it is packed with real solutions.
They don't want anybody looking inside this monstrosity. There's nothing beautiful or big about stripping 14 million Americans of their health care or removing food security from 11 million people, including 4 million kids. That's ugly. That's small.
This is one of the most important votes we will ever cast in this chamber. I am proud to stand here on behalf of this side of the aisle and say hell no to this bill.
And so now the bill heads over to the Senate, where Republicans are already warning today that they are planning to make potentially some pretty major changes to this bill, particularly when it comes to those Medicaid cuts. And all of that could really complicate the calculus for Speaker Mike Johnson, who is warning his Senate colleagues not to change the bill too much, given just how hard it was to put together a coalition and get this over the finish line. So yes, a big victory for Republicans today, but we're still very early in this process with a lot more to go here.
Melanie, thank you so much for that. So, Allie, you've been going through the massive bill. Thank you in advance, because there were a lot of last-minute changes.
A lot of last-minute changes and a lot of pages even before we got to that 40-plus page manager's amendment. But look, you can't blame Speaker Johnson for trying, asking his Senate colleagues not to make too many changes, because he did a lot of haggling to get folks on board. And part of the reason he had so much negotiating to do was because of this debt limit increase number down here at the bottom of the screen. Now, there's a few different estimations on this. We're going with the Joint Committee on Taxation's estimate here that it's $3.8 trillion in actual debt increase packed into this bill. In large part, that's because of the extension of the 2017 Trump tax rates. That was always going to be a top priority, and here it is, top of the list as we track the tax changes here. But the other sticking point for Republicans among themselves was this SALT tax deduction. They've raised that cap now from $10,000 to $40,000, a way to placate some of the blue state Republicans in the conference. Also raising the child tax credit, no tax on tips. It's a notable campaign promise kept, at least for now, but that expires in 2028 the way it's written. Then we look at the health care pieces of this, and this is where Democrats have spent a lot of time shining light on what's in this bill, because Medicaid work requirements as well as increases in eligibility checks, both central as a pay-for mechanism in this, a way to take down federal spending. Barring Medicaid and CHIP funding for gender-affirming care. It says for minors, but in that manager's amendment, that language was actually taken out, so that's now applicable across the board. Just a sign of how small some of these changes might be, even though they have big implications from an impact perspective. Also, blocking money from nonprofit reproductive health providers. This is effectively Republicans defunding Planned Parenthood, and fun fact, actually costs them $300 million per the Congressional Budget Office to do so. That all in all leads to 8.6 million plus Americans who could be left without health insurance because of the implications in this bill. The same can frankly be said, Chris, for food assistance programs, because this bill cuts more than $260 billion to SNAP. It's one of the biggest overhauls in the way that this program is funded by requiring states to share some of the costs. It's going to be pretty disruptive at the state-by-state level, but it also tightens work requirements for SNAP recipients. All in all, this means that more than 3 million Americans could lose food assistance programs like SNAP, like WIC, that they so heavily rely on. And then you get to some of the other policy priorities from the administration. Immigration and more money for enforcement was one of the top other priorities in addition to that tax piece. And that's why you see $110 billion in enforcement spending, the bulk of that going to the Department of Justice, DOJ, and HHS. But also another pay-for mechanism here could be imposing the fees on various immigrant actions. For example, talking about $1,000 for immigrants who want to file asylum claims. So that's another way that you're seeing Republicans try to generate some revenue within this bill. But jam-packed, and again, as much as the Speaker might wish that Senate Republicans aren't going to make that many changes, they certainly are, and this bill is going to look very different when it actually comes back to the House at some point this summer, Chris.
Thank you so much for taking us through that step by step. Governor, you were chair of the House Budget Committee. You know this process well. First of all, no question, right? It's a win for Trump and Johnson. They got largely what they wanted. I guess the question is, before we see what the Senate does to this, is this a win for the American people as well?
Chris, the problem is we're adding trillions of dollars to the already staggering high national debt. And I've been warning about this. I've talked to you about this countless times. At some point, as our debt continues to rise, people who finance our debt, foreign governments that finance our debt, are going to say, nope, we're not buying any more. And as the debt continues to rise, you can see what's happening to the bond markets. You can also see that Moody's downgraded the United States' credit rating. This is a bill that I'm not surprised it's going to pass. It's going to pass the Senate. It's going to be signed into law, but it doesn't deal with the problem at all. It adds
but do you think, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying, Governor. Yeah. Do you think it's going to pass, given the fact that we are headed toward unprecedented, historically unprecedented levels of debt.
Yeah.
You think the
Yeah, I
Senate
do.
will not be a stopgap at that?
No, I don't. In fact, they're going to make it. They'll make the bill less fiscally responsible, although that's really a stretch too. Chris, here's the thing. Remember, you may not be old enough to remember Ross Perot, but Ross Perot was on Larry King all the time talking about the problem of the debt. The problem we have in the country is people don't think it's a problem. They don't understand it. People like me, we've cried wolf for so long that people go, oh, well, what difference does it make what the debt is? And so until people understand why the debt matters, what the consequences are of continuing to go in this direction, will we have solutions? And so we're not even at the point where people say, yeah, this is a problem. The only people talking about the fact that it's a problem are our seniors. Even our younger people just don't pay much attention, and this has to be addressed until people understand this. And look at what's happening with the bond market. It is a signal that people are losing, that investors are losing faith and trust in the ability of the United States to handle the debt. Now, can it be fixed? It can, but it can't be done little by little, tiny piece here, tiny piece there. It is a comprehensive approach. And look, I did it down there with my colleagues, and we've got the budget balanced. And it wasn't easy, and we didn't ignore entitlements, and we got it done here in Ohio when I was running big debt. The combination is grow the economy. That's why tax cuts are important, not some of them, not the taxes, getting rid of the taxes on tips, or they just gave a big boost to Social Security. Those things they're not going to grow the economy. You grow the economy, and at the same time, you reform the programs to reduce spending, and those two will meet over time, and you can begin to restore confidence in the fiscal stability the economic stability of the United States of America. When we saw the bond market crashing and the market plummeting, during the tariff stuff, and that's still going on now, by the way, the tariff impact, that is going to be child's play. If we don't get on this at some point, we have to ready some solutions. We have to inform the public what the problems are, what the consequences are, and then they'll be willing to go along. Do I think this can be done? Yes. Do I think it can be done at this point in time? No. We don't have the players and the leadership to do it.
Former Ohio Governor John Kasich, thank you.
Y es que amigos, 2.2 billones en recortes de impuestos, 700.000 millones en recortes al Medicaid, y eso solo es parte de un paquete. Miren, hay que ser honestos. Cuando un político te dice voy a bajar los impuestos, lo que no te dice es a quién se los va a subir después o qué servicios vas a perder a cambio, porque el dinero no aparece por arte de magia. En este caso, Donald Trump está vendiendo un paquete que suena beneficioso para todos, pero está diseñado para beneficiar a los de siempre, a los que ganan más de $500,000 al año. Y tú vas a tener que ver cómo se recortan fondos para salud, para educación, becas estudiantiles. Todo para poder financiar la promesa de no pagar impuestos por horas extras. Además, el truquito de siempre, ¿no? Hacen estos recortes con fecha de expiración, sabiendo que el Congreso casi siempre los termina haciendo permanentes. Es decir, no solo destruyen el presupuesto actual, sino que prácticamente han hipotecado el futuro. Y si alguien viene y dice, pero es que así incentivamos la economía, solo tienes que mirar los datos. Las reducciones de impuestos a los más ricos no se traducen en inversión ni en salarios más altos. Lo que sí hacen es aumentar la desigualdad y termina debilitando el Estado. Si no me creen, pregunten a los 8.6 millones de personas que podrían perder su seguro de salud con este nuevo proyecto de ley. Bueno, que no podrían, van a perderlo. Algunos dirán, bueno, al menos la gente va a pagar menos impuestos. ¿No es eso bueno? Claro, si eres Jeff Bezos. Pero si estás en el 20% más pobre, no solo no vas a ahorrar, sino que vas a perder hasta $800 al año. ¿Por qué? Porque te recortan Medicaid y ayudas que prácticamente podrías usar todos los días. O sea, este plan no es neutral, amigos, es regresivo. Favorece a los de arriba, perjudica a los de abajo. Olvida completamente a la clase media. Entonces, ¿qué nos deja todo esto? Donald Trump vuelve a utilizar el manual de siempre. Populismo económico con trampa. Promete alivio fiscal mientras desmantela los pilares que sostienen a millones de estadounidenses. Y no, amigos, no se trata de estar en contra de los ricos. Se trata de ser justos, ser responsables, ser conscientes del impacto que tiene esta decisión en la vida real. Pero bueno, ¿qué opinan ustedes sobre todo esto? ¿Creen que estos recortes son necesarios o es un retroceso? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerda, como siempre, dale like, compártelo con tus amigos y suscríbete a nuestro canal Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.